Before we get into the video today, I want to go over something I mentioned in the end of the video that I feel like I need to add to the very beginning so that people avoid missing it and avoid a lot of frustration. So I mentioned in the video, there's two different brands that I use. I use this one off Amazon that comes with a little black button right here. You can barely see it. It's a little tiny black button. You'll see it in the video. But the Buzzard Hobbies one, or the Buzzard models, theirs does not have one. So you don't follow this procedure with theirs. You just plug theirs up, you hold the bind button and cycle it on, and it'll bind. I think you have to do it within 10 seconds on the Buzzard models version. On this one with the button, what you're going to have to do is you really need 3 hands. So what I try to do, I try to get my plug lined up first. That way I'm not fighting that. So we'll get that lined up in there. We'll get it where we can grab onto it. All right, power is flicked on and off a couple times, but we got it off right now. You're gonna hold this button and you're gonna let it beat. Let off of it, you got a fast blinking light, all right? So notice that it's blinking fast. When I change this, when I hit this bind button and cycle this on, you gotta hold the bind button on the GT5 and cycle the switch on. See how slow it's blinking now? But like on the Buzzard models, it would automatically go into being able to use the controller. Well, this one just keeps showing bind, and if you pull the trigger, turn the steering, whatever, nothing's going to happen. There's nothing right now. As you can see, I can move the steering and everything. So what they don't mention on the Amazon listing, you have to cycle this off, then cycle it back on. And then notice your light is solid now, and you cannot move the steering. All right, so now we got steering, we got throttle, and it's as simple as that. But I wanted to put this in at the beginning of the video so that y'all weren't confused or have any frustrations with these products that I'm telling y'all about. So if you have any questions, always reach out and ask, but y'all enjoy the video. Welcome back to the channel, guys. It's Mazz back again with another video for you guys. Again, my voice is still tore up, so I'm gonna try to make it through this. But today we're gonna be soldering up a micro receiver for a GT5. This so happens to be for a GT5. You can get them for multiple different protocols. The protocol is what actually defines which controller or which transmitters can be used with. So a GT5 is AFHDS2A, shortened FS2A-4 channel. So you can buy these off Amazon. If you don't want to solder, buy them directly from Buzzard models. And that is Buzzard like a bird models. They'll already come soldered up. These come in 2 pieces. So your pins are held together with that little black support piece, and then your board. And you can see it's not soldered. It's just got pins through the hole. So when you get them, it comes in a bag. You can see right here, a little clear piece of heat shrink, your pins, and the board all separate in there. When you get them from Buzzard models, and I'll put these links in the description, but when you get them, they're already soldered on, and they're soldered on this direction. You can turn these around and flip them to where they're over the board. The only thing I don't like about that is on these from Amazon, you actually have a bind button. The ones from Buzzard models does not have a bind button. It does it automatically from powering on the vehicle and then turning the GT5 into bind mode. This one, you physically have to hit this button. So if you flip it over, or if you flip it from this side and solder it from this side, there's always a possibility that this button's gonna get hit when it needs to be hit if it's not covered, or if you're soldering them from this side, this button gets held down by the heat shrink and then it won't bind. I always just put mine on like this, but when you get them from people that have already soldered them, they're just like this. So the pins you can see right there, the pins are just barely through and they're real high up. When I do mine, There's nothing on this board. You can see right there, there's nothing on this board that's going to come in contact with these lowest pins. So I always try to get my pins down as far as I possibly can. It just takes all this extra length off of it. This will all get trimmed. So what I'll do is I'll trim one. I'll trim one on the corner. I'll trim one over here, one here, one here, and I'll get these 4 sides soldered on, and that'll hold everything together. Then I'll go back and trim all the rest of my pins down, and I'll trim them just about the depth of that point on the top of them. Leave that much, just that little point, if you see right at my fingernail, where that bevel starts up. That's about all I'll leave poking through over the board. So what I'll do is I'll get this set up. You definitely want you some helping hands. These are not the best ones. I've had these for ages. I actually think they were my pops, or I believe so. Also, you're gonna want some 60/40 solder. Buy you some nice solder. Don't buy cheap solder. Don't get stuff off Amazon. Even if it doesn't say lead free, more than likely it's lead free. You're gonna want a 60/40, and this is a 0.03 thickness. So, you know, it's very thin, not, you know, a big heavy gauge. You're not soldering plumbing or anything like that. It's very thin, and that helps with making the solder flow quickly and re-solidify quickly as well once you get off the heat. So what I'll do is I'll get this set up on my helping hands, and we'll get back to you. And I will already have these pins clipped on what I decide to use to hold them on to begin with. So like I said, I always solder a few up first just to hold everything in place, and then I clip the rest of them. That way I'm not sitting there moving pins in and out by accident and having to finagle with them. So let me get this set up, and I'll come back to you and we'll show you what the next step is. So I have it set up now, and don't be like me. Get you some little silicone covers that go over your alligator clips. That way you don't have a possibility of messing a board up, tearing something off the board. I'm very careful with it. I've done it a bunch of times. That don't mean nothing though. I could screw this one up. We don't know. So when you use your solder, don't try to hold this whole thing in your hand. Y'all see how I got this huge piece stretched out? I move this out the way, and then I grab just the end of my solder, and that way I don't have a bunch of weight. I'm just literally using just the weight of the solder. There's not a whole bunch of resistance or anything, or me having to hold my hand up with a big thing of solder. So also, this is my soldering iron. You're always going to want to make sure this tip, like, you cannot clean this tip. I know that's what she says, but you cannot clean this tip enough. You know what I'm saying? You don't want a dirty tip. Y'all go ahead and start hitting those comments below, because I know y'all are going to have a field day. But I always want to do that. I also use some, oh, better if you can read it. No Clean Flux Paste. This is by MG Chemicals. You can get it a little cheaper than this. I buy this stuff. It's nice. It comes in a nice syringe. Has a nice tip on it. I know we're going to say the word tip a whole lot, but nice size tip. Comes in a syringe. I've already done what I told y'all I was going to do to get set up. So as you can see, only my 4 corners, see how they're cut down? And all the other ones are tall. So I do that so that when I go to solder, I can get those 4 corners soldered, and then everything's held in place. And I'm just going to double check off camera to make sure everything's still in place. And it is. I just like to double check it. I like to have my pins run parallel with the board. I don't like them out of whack. The more time you take with this on preparing everything, the better it's going to come out. I'm not going to try to make this video too long. So I'm trying to work on this through the camera. So just bear with me. Put a little bit of flux. It's hard to get just a little on these boards, but it doesn't even really need a glob. If you just touch it, it's going to have enough. And all this does is keep the oxidation. See how I just got this one little ball of solder? I'm literally just pushing it down on the pins. Sorry for knocking the camera, guys. Just pushing it down on the pins and then taking it away. And all that's doing is just barely putting a little flux on each one of them. Coming from this side. So there we go. A little solder on it, or a little flux on each one. It just keeps the oxidation from, it holds the oxidation from happening while you're soldering. And again, I'm just going to double check. I know I'm doing this on camera, so, but I'm still going to take my time. This is still a part I'm going to use. So if I bump the camera, guys, I'm sorry. It's kind of right in my way. So we'll see if we can get a couple of these soldered up. So you're gonna see me. I'm gonna keep cleaning this tip the whole time when I'm not using it. So let's get y'all down a little bit here. So we got our solder over here. Like I said, pull you off a bunch. We're gonna pull off a little more. I have my soldering iron on about 700 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty hot, but I like to solder quick and not leave the heat on there a long time. So if you got a high temperature, and what you're going to do is tin that tip. All right, y'all see all that smoke coming off? That also will help you clean. This tip cleaner kit that I have right here, this can, it also has flux in the bottom of it. So if you push it down real hard, it gets some fresh flux on it. So we're going real quick here, and you're probably not even going to see this, but we're just going to very quickly start to put a little heat. And that's all it takes right there. Y'all see that little ball? We're going to add just a touch more because I'm very light with it on the very first one, because you don't have anything but friction holding those pins in. And I've not even touched it. I'm just holding it there. So let me get a little better angle. Like I said, guys, I'm trying to, if y'all have ever done this, y'all know how tough it is to work through a lens. There you go. That's the first one done. So let me get these other 4 soldered on real quick. And that'll be the top right corner, top left corner, bottom left corner. Let me get those soldered on real quick. And then I'll get all the other ones trimmed down off camera, and I'll come back and I'll run through the rest of them real quick on camera. But this is a very simple process. It's all about preparation, having the right tool for the job. You will definitely want a nice soldering iron. I'll show you. I don't have anything crazy. I think it's about 60 bucks, something like that, on Amazon. I don't even know how to say it, but nothing crazy. And that's what I like to use. So let's get back to the to soldering these up, and I'll come right back and show y'all the last bit of the procedure. So we got the pins soldered up in all 4 corners. Also went ahead and trimmed off all of the others. As you can see, it looks like a mess on there. I just put just a very tiny bit of flux on each one of those, and that flux is all going to melt immediately as heat gets around it, and it all draws to the copper components or the pins. It all stays in that area. It doesn't really go towards the board. It's also not, it doesn't have any corrosive properties. That's why it's called no clean flux paste. Also, to cut mine, I use these and I shoot them all the way across my garage. I hear them randomly hit off the ceiling and bounce about 3 or 4 times. Does a very good job, but I just cut them down just to where they're barely protruding above the top of the board. Just barely. I mean, maybe like a millimeter. So I'm gonna try to do the rest of these on camera for you guys. And I'm sorry if I'm blocking the view or anything, but it'll give y'all kind of more of an idea of like how much time you need to have the heat on there. And it's something that comes with just feel at the end of the day. And don't be afraid to, you know, solder. So, and all you're really doing, and see, you'll see me pull up real quick, because the quicker you pull up, the less of, you'll see little spikes come up off of it if you come up real slow, and it's because you're giving it time for the solder to cool down, and it's not away from this, so it's not a puddle anymore. It's just like pulling away from it. So we soldered that one, And you always tin your tip first, even after you clean it. I know we've been doing this. And honestly, most of the flow happens just from the tip heating up the, and I can go and I can come back and clean this up afterwards. So just getting that, loading up that tip, you really don't have to feed solder in, and we'll clean this one back up a little bit. I might have to cut this one down a little bit more. It's a little high. I can probably get away with it though. And you can always trim them a little bit after they're soldered. They're more supported then too. So I always try to skip around the board some. So we'll come down here now. And you'll see it just wants to grab onto that copper. So you'll see it, man. You're like, you get these things already soldered. You're like, how is it a perfect dot? Well, that all comes from heat and the solder following where the heat is. Well, the heat goes to the copper because it's so conductive of heat. It goes there instead of the coating on the board that is like a heat resistant coating. So it's all going to stay in that dot pretty much. Let me just put a little bit on. Sometimes you got to put a little extra. Pull up quick on it. A little more on that one. And I literally, like I told y'all, I'm at like 697 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 370 degrees C. So it's pretty hot. That's why I don't like to keep it on there for long periods of time. Maybe a couple seconds at most, and then back off for a second. Let it solidify. So there we go. As quick as that, we've soldered up a board. And I'm going to try to get just a little bit more on this one that's tall back here. And that way when I go to cut it and trim it off, it doesn't have any possibility of breaking or anything. But it's just a clean dot on each one. So just one dot. And we could probably use a little more in those two on those three in the center. It's really hard for me to see it through this camera lens, and it's blocking all of my light to be able to see. So put a little more there, a little more there. And it literally doesn't take much. So like I probably had enough, but I like to make them look uniform. So there we go. We're all soldered up. We have a nice ball on every single one of them. We'll come back to the corners just to make sure that they got enough on them, because that was our first ones. And any of our movement. And you can see, so you see that? That's what I'm talking about. By trying to pull off there quick, it pulls this off. Let me try not to burn my hand. It pulls this off. If not, if you go slow, it leaves this same exact little pointed deal on your ball of solder, and it's terrible. So as simple as that, guys, that's all it takes to solder up a little board. Guaranteed 100% to work. Take your time. Don't be scared of it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. That's what I'm here for. I'm always, if y'all DM me on Facebook, Instagram, my emails is the last thing I check. So you can get me quickest on Facebook, Instagram. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Also, on these, when you follow the bind procedure with a GT5, the one instruction they do not give you at the end of those procedures is that it looks like it doesn't bind. And I'm just doing this off memory. So you turn this on, hit your button, it'll start blinking. Then you'll hit your bind button on your GT5 and turn the power on while you're holding the bind button. It'll then change the flashing sequence on there, but it'll look like it's never connected. You then have to cycle the transmitter off and then back on, and that's when you'll get a solid light showing that it's bound. As always, guys, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Also, if you have questions and you just want to send them here, you can send them here. I respond back to all the comments down below. If you don't have a question, tell me a joke down there. Make me laugh, man. I need something every day to make me laugh. But once again, guys, appreciate y'all tuning in. Like, comment, and subscribe. And until the next time, guys, y'all have a good one.